Tonight on KQED Newsroom, we analyze President Trump and Vice President Joe Biden's starkly different conversations with voters in their dueling town halls. And we review the Senate confirmation hearings of Supreme Court nominee Amy Coney Barrett. Also, 1 in 10 eligible voters this election cycle is part of Generation Z. We hear about the issues that matter most to our youngest voters. Welcome to KQED Newsroom. I'm Priya David Clemens. And now for KQED Newsroom's Election 2020 coverage. Since President Trump was unwilling to debate Vice President Biden virtually, this week's planned presidential debate turned into separate televised town halls. Trump spoke to voters in Miami on NBC at the same time Biden was speaking to voters in Philadelphia on ABC. Supreme Court nominee Amy Coney Barrett took center stage for much of this week as she was alternately lauded and grilled by senators during her multi-day confirmation hearing. She sidestepped answers to specific questions raised by senators, including California Senators Dianne Feinstein and Kamala Harris. Joining me now by Skype from San Francisco is KQED Senior Editor of Politics and Government, Scott Schaefer. And also joining by Skype is KQED Politics and Government Correspondent, Marisa Lagos. Thanks both for joining. Scott, before we get down to the town halls and the Senate hearings, let's talk about the president's back and forth on providing relief money for California's wildfires. What is going on here?
Yeah, so there was an emergency declaration request sent to the White House and FEMA by Governor Gavin Newsom. And initially, we found out on Thursday that the application had been rejected by FEMA, which was kind of a surprise because these applications have been approved for previous wildfires. And so that created a bit of a stir. Suddenly we had House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy from Bakersfield on the phone with the president. And within a few hours, the president had overruled that original rejection. And the governor announced on Friday afternoon that, in fact, his declaration was approved by the White House. So it just goes to show you there is a lot of politics, especially in an election year, when it comes to these disaster declarations.
Okay, so let's turn to the town halls last night. Maurice, I'll start with you. President Trump's town hall felt very combative. The moderator pushed him for answers on his tax payments, his debt, white supremacy, his willingness to accept the results of the election, among several other topics. So from your perspective, did the president hurt or help himself with undecided voters last night?
It's so hard to tell at this point, Priya. I mean, it feels almost impossible that people are still undecided, right, in this race. I think that, honestly, he did better probably for undecideds than he did during that town hall or that initial debate with Joe Biden, where obviously he was speaking over Biden and was just sort of nasty. I think while he was combative with the moderator last night, it didn't feel quite as aggressive as we've seen him in some situations. So it's probably a draw. I can't see either of the town halls moving the needle on this race that far. But certainly a better showing for the president than a couple weeks ago.
It was also a better night, Scott, for Vice President Biden. He was very calm and measured in his responses, sometimes maybe a little too detailed. But I think it's very telling that 1 million more people tuned in to watch him than to watch President Trump, which, you know, probably does not go down well with President Trump, who loves to have the ratings on TV. What do you think about Joe Biden's performance last night? Do you think it energized voters to come out for him?
I don't know if energize is the right word. I mean, it was a very calm, almost dull performance. But in some ways, you know, I think, Priya, that's what voters want. A lot of voters, a lot of Americans are just exhausted by the drama and the chaos that they feel has been coming out of this administration. And so while Joe Biden may not be the most exciting candidate, maybe that's a plus for him in this particular year. A thing that's motivating Democrats is Trump himself and their extreme dislike for him. So I think that he's got that. Biden has that going for him. On the president's side, of course, there are, you know, between 35 and 42% of his base who, you know, like him no matter what. So, they're going to be there for him. And I think there's probably a few people that are, maybe leaning toward Biden. Maybe that's why more people tuned in to watch Biden, is that they want to confirm maybe that they have a safe choice if they vote for Biden.
It does seem like it is in line with the polls that we're seeing, both at the state level and the national level, that have Biden ahead. The coronavirus is declining slightly here in California, the number of cases in the state, but on the nation it's still on the rise, and across the world it is still rising. rising, and in places like Europe, where they have some curfews, it has gotten bad. How has President Trump's handling of the coronavirus really impacted the vote? It's a piece that the Democrats keep hammering over and over again. Does it seem to resonate with voters in terms of saying, yes, President Trump did not handle this well?
So, Priya, I think if you look at the polls, that is what we're seeing, that people felt like it made sense to some extent that Trump got COVID-19 because he hasn't been that careful. And so I do think that that's one of those areas where you could see a real movement on these independent voters, undecided voters. This is something that is in our lives every day. This is not some abstract notion of a policy in Washington that may or may not affect us. And so I think that that is absolutely the reason that Trump wanted to come out so quickly and say that he has recovered from this virus, why his office was so cagey about his medical status throughout this entire thing. And I think that, you know, when you add that up with what it's done to the economy, it's a real problem for the president, and it's one that he's really trying hard to kind of pivot from. You know, he said last night repeatedly that we're turning the corner on this, which I don't think is the case in the majority of this country.
And Scott, what do you see as the key issue for the Democrats and the key issue for the Republicans in this final 3 weeks of the election cycle?
Well, again, I think for Democrats, you're seeing people who have never voted before or who skipped 2016, people who have never registered to vote, first-time voters, and they're voting early. We're seeing in California, over 2 million people have already cast their ballots. And so the motivation clearly is a fear of having the president reelected and a desire to see him replaced by Joe Biden. For Republicans, I think that they they like the president's agenda. They see him as somebody who doesn't talk down to ordinary people, who is shaking things up in Washington, who's being tough with China, who supports a woman's, who opposes abortion, who is not so strongly in support of LGBT rights. So evangelical voters are solidly for the president by and large. So I think, both sides have their motivations. It just seems like if the turnout is large, which it seems to be so far, that's going to really probably benefit Biden.
Let's turn to the Senate hearings for Supreme Court nominee Amy Coney Barrett. She regularly sidestepped direct questions, and when she did so, she invoked the Ginsburg rule. And I'd like to listen to what Justice Ginsburg said during her confirmation hearings back in 1993.
A judge sworn to decide impartially can offer no forecasts, no hints, for that would show not only disregard for the specifics of the particular case, it would display disdain for the entire judicial process.
Scott, despite the fact that these justices or nominees are saying they want to be impartial, this seat, being a Supreme Court justice, is seen as inherently political these days. So are Democrats right that should Amy Coney Barrett get confirmed, which it seems like she's on a glide path to do, that will benefit President Trump in particular and the Republican Party in general?
Well, I think in the long term, that certainly is what they're hoping for. I think President Trump and many Republicans are hoping that, in fact, she will be a vote to strike down the Affordable Care Act, although she insists she has no animosity toward that law. So we'll have to wait and see. Clearly, I think one of the most troubling aspects of her testimony was that she described climate change as still controversial, which is not a position that 99% of scientists would say is the case. In the short term, I think Republicans may suffer. Because you've got senators like Susan Collins in Maine, Cory Gardner in Colorado, who are in very tough races. And, there is a sense overall in the country that this should wait until after the election. And then you've got a lot of people concerned about the very things you just described, the kind of positions that, Justice Barrett might take. And so it could also boost Democratic turnout as well. There's still a lot of lingering anger at the Merrick Garland nomination that went nowhere when President Obama was president, back in 2016 after Scalia died. So there's motivation on both sides. I think short term, probably a benefit to the Democrats, long term, perhaps Republicans.
And Marisa, I want to ask you about both California Senators Kamala Harris and Dianne Feinstein, who questioned the nominee Amy Coney Barrett on issues such as abortion and health care. Was there a moment that you found particularly effective?
Yeah, I would say that, Dianne Feinstein really stuck to the script. She didn't have any sort of huge moments, but I think Kamala Harris did a very effective job. The climate change question that Scott sort of brought up was part of a series where Harris basically asked her, do you accept that COVID is something, is transmissible? Do you accept, I can't remember, her second question was around another scientific issue, and then led into this climate change question, which Barrett refused to answer, saying it could come before the court. I think that and her unwillingness to wade into the issue of whether a president should accept a peaceful transition of power really took that Ginsburg principle to a whole new level. And I think that Harris was effective because she wasn't as combative as we've seen her in previous hearings.
Mm-hmm. Scott, this week, the California Republican Party admitted to installing unofficial ballot boxes in Fresno, Los Angeles, and Orange counties. Now, the state attorney general, Xavier Becerra, has sent them a cease and desist letter, but they've refused, saying that state law allows them to collect ballots. What's the latest?
Well, the latest is that Republicans sent a letter back to the Attorney General and the Secretary of State saying, we have mislabeled some of those boxes and that's been fixed, but we are going to continue with this program just as Democrats have. They say they're complying with the law other than that label, which they acknowledge could have been done better. But they say, look, the Democrats created these rules. They used them in 2018 to great effect. There were a lot of midterm election seats that went to Democrats, and some Republicans, blamed that so-called ballot harvesting on the loss of those Republican seats. So it looks like, to me, today, the Attorney General backing away a little bit from his threat of suing the Republican Party. He said that they're continuing to investigate, but I think the temperature is really lowered on this. And I think that, Republicans made a point that, look, this is the law. We didn't like the law, but we're going to follow it just as Democrats have been doing.
Marisa, coming up on the show, we're going to be talking about the youth vote and Gen Z. And there's actually a California Proposition 18, which is focused specifically on the youth vote. Can you talk us through what this proposition is and its chances of passing?
Yeah, so this is a measure that essentially says if you are 17 but will be 18 by a general election in the same year, you may weigh in the primary. The idea being that you should have a say in who's going to be on the ballot in the general election if you're going to vote on it. This was put on the ballot by Democrats in the legislature. It's largely opposed by the Republican Party. And interestingly, the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association as well. They're worried that high schoolers will have sort of undue influence by teachers who might support things like school bonds or tax increases. The other argument, against it is essentially that we have set 18 as a kind of litmus for a lot of things. That's when you become an adult. You shouldn't get to vote earlier. But obviously, I think a lot of young people are really excited about this, and I think it is going to be really interesting to see how it goes.
Marisa Lagos and Scott Schaefer, both with KQED, thank you for your insight and your time as always.
Thank you.
Visit kqed.org/voter guide for a comprehensive look at all the state and local ballot measures, including summaries and arguments for and against them. Generation Z is made up of people born after 1996. They're also sometimes referred to as Zoomers. They're the generation following the millennials, and they represent 10% of all eligible voters this year. They're a racially and ethnically diverse group. Roughly 20% are Latinx, a share that's higher than in millennials, Generation X members, or baby boomers, according to the Pew Research Center. Surveys indicate the issues they care most about are climate change, racism, and income inequality. Joining me now by Skype from St. Petersburg, Florida, is Alexa Volland, a multimedia reporter and a fact-checking editor at MediaWise, a project of the Poynter Institute that helps teach people how to spot misinformation and fake news online. And joining by Skype from Oakland is Samantha Ivey, a senior at Skyline High School. Thank you both for joining. Sam, you're going to be a first-time voter. What issues are most pressing to you?
So the issues that are most pressing to me as a member of Generation Z would be economic inequality, racial inequality, and gender inequality, which are all kind of lumped together. in some sort of way.
And Alexa, you do a lot of work with young voters. How are Sam's concerns similar to and different from what you're hearing from young people across the nation?
Very similar. I lead a teen fact-checking network, so I work with a team of about 30 teenagers spread across the U.S., and they help us by combating the spread of misinformation by fact-checking claims they come across on their own social media feed. So we really want them to be pitching claims they find naturally on their own social, but things that they're also interested in fact-checking. We're seeing a lot of claims related to issues related to climate, racial injustice, They're also very interested in fact-checking claims related to LGBTQ rights and gun control. And teenagers, like all of us, are living through a global pandemic. They're also very interested in getting accurate information related to the coronavirus.
Sam, it seems like young people are very energized to vote. There was a Harvard youth poll that came out, said 63% of people ages 18 to 29 are saying they will definitely vote in this election. That's up from 47% in 2016. So I'm curious for you, among your peers, are you getting the sense, Sam, that your peers are energized and they're looking forward to going out and voting for the first time?
Yeah, well, peers as in friends, the people I'm close to who are also around my age, yeah, they're all very politically active, very passionate. I also do learn a lot from them. I'm probably one of the oldest friends in my friend group, so I'm going to be the only one who's going to be able to vote this coming election, but that does seem to be the case. However, there are other people in other classes or other internships around my age. There seems to be two kind of fields of thought when it comes to voting around this age. There's, hard left-leaning, very passionate, but instead of like hard right-leaning, there's also this nihilism, this kind of apathy. So the two attitudes I typically get from my generation are either, very passionate, very ready for change, very ready to go out there and vote, or kind of this idea that there's no point in voting, or, all the options are bad anyways. So they don't even, bother getting themselves involved in politics because they feel like they're above it somehow.
Yeah, well, Alexa, I'm curious, do you see that reflected in your work with teens across the nation as well, those two types of attitudes?
Yeah, that's interesting. The teens that I work with care very strongly about their quality of news. They care about this election. And from my teens, which is a small sample size of kids that really care about news and politics, they're very committed to voting. So while I work with a smaller sample size, I do hope that they're reflective of Generation Z as a whole.
Alexa, tell us about the ways in which you help teens become more savvy consumers of digital media and how you teach them to separate fact from fiction online.
Sure, we've got quite a few tips as well as free resources, but the thing that we try to stress the most are these 3 questions which were developed by the Stanford History Education Group, and these are questions which I'm sure you'll be familiar with that professional journalists and fact checkers use. The first being is, who is behind the information? This will tell you a lot. Are they biased? Are they an expert? Do they have something to gain from you sharing this information? The second question would be, what is the evidence? If you see something online, is there a link to go with it? And is it a link to a reputable source that you trust? Are they giving you any proof to believe what they're saying is true? And the third question would be, what are other sources saying? We tend to read one article and we read vertically up and down, and then we pretty much leave that page. We really stress the importance of reading 3 to 4 multiple sources, opening up tabs and reading laterally across all of them. Lateral reading is another term developed by the Stanford History Education Group, and it really ensures that you get a full picture and full context of what's happening.
Sam, how often are you and your peers using these sorts of tools, and what sort of social media platforms do you get your news from?
When it comes to those tools specifically, I don't exactly actively kind of employ them. They're just kind of subconscious when I do remember to use them. But at the same time, I get my news from a few different sources. I started out by watching kind of late night talk shows. I watched The Daily Show with Jon Stewart, now The Daily Show with Trevor Noah, and other shows like that. I get my news from the app on my phone that shows me the news. But it also depends on who you follow on these social medias. For example, if I follow a news organization or a news anchor I trust on Instagram, I'm more likely to believe what they post. Or if I follow a politician I'm advocating for, or an economist. Like, I follow Andrew Yang on Instagram, so I'm more likely to trust what he posts based on like the economy and other things like that. As far as my friends, I'm not so sure because sometimes we share stuff with each other and we correct each other, like, wait, that's not actually true because X, Y, and Z.
And Alexa, you really encourage that for teens to share with each other what is accurate and what is not accurate and how to spot misinformation. So I'd like to play a video that MediaWise created on TikTok that shows these skills in operation.
Y'all, this Facebook video wrongly claimed that mail-in ballot envelopes show what your party affiliation is.
They put R right here and D right.
The video suggests that postal workers could toss out ballots from parties they don't like. Let's fact check this together. To see if this was legit, I did a quick keyword search, and right away I could see that this claim has been heavily fact-checked by organizations like FactCheck.org, USA Today, and the Associated Press. And according to FactCheck.org, these ballots are from the Florida primary. Florida has a closed primary, meaning that voters can only vote in the primary of the party they're registered in. But in this general election, all ballots will look the same, regardless of a voter's party affiliation or who they choose to vote for. We rank this claim not legit. There's a lot of misinformation out there about mail-in voting, just don't share it. Be skeptical of posts trying to prevent you from voting, check with your local Board of Elections website for specific questions, and know that your party is not on your ballot.
So Alexa, that's a great example of the sort of work that you're doing through MediaWise to get information out. Let's turn specifically to this issue about ballots and voting. Are you seeing concerns from young people about voting by mail?
Sure. Voting is already complex, and then add to it that we're seeing so much misinformation about voting by mail. And these posts are really trying to discourage or incite some sense of doubt in the system. And every year we see a post on social media about how you can vote by text, which is false. And I would say that first-time voters are concerned about mail-in voting, and there's been a lot of misinformation surrounding this. A good media literacy tip, which is in that TikTok, is the importance of going straight to the source, heading to a primary source. In that case, if you have any questions related to voting, I would go to your state-specific Board of Elections website, and that's where you can make sure you're getting the most accurate information, not from some random person on Instagram or Twitter.
Sam, you'll be turning 18 in a couple of weeks, and even though you're registered to vote, you're having trouble getting your ballot. Tell us what's happening.
Yeah. So my mom's ballot came, and my ballot was supposed to come with her, but it didn't. So she tried to call them, but they said that legally I was supposed to be on the call with her. So then she set up a conference call with, me, her, and, Alameda registration. And they said that it's on our way. So we thought we should be getting it in a few days. And we wait a whole week, but we still didn't get it. So we called them again, and they told me that it's because I'm under 18 right now. So they didn't send it out because they thought I was not eligible to vote. I explained to them that I'm going to be, 18 in a week now. And, they're very apologetic. They said they were going to send it out, but we still haven't seen it. We're going to call again today. But it is frustrating because I was really excited to vote. And I'm really hoping that I'll be able to vote by mail because, from what I've seen on the news, it seems like voting by in-person voting seems very much a hassle and really stressful. And
well, good for you
I'd much prefer to vote by mail.
for sticking with it. Sam, tell us why you think it's so important for you and other young people to vote.
Because this is my country. This is our country. We don't have the choice to be apathetic or nihilistic because we're going to be adults soon. This is going to be ours. I know this isn't exactly what we wanted to inherit, but we don't exactly have a choice at this point. And it is your responsibility because even though you don't think it, this election is going to affect you. And if it doesn't, it's going to affect the people around you and the people you love. Even if you choose not to vote, you're actually voting with your actions by saying that you're fine with the status quo. You're fine with everything that's happening right now. So if things don't go very well and you choose not to vote, then I'm afraid that's on you.
Well, Sam, I appreciate your passion, and Alexa, I'm sure you're seeing that as well with the teens you're working with from what you've told us. Alexa, as part of your work with MediaWise, you run a project called the Teen Fact-Checking Network. Can you tell us about that and what it does?
Sure. The Teen Fact-Checking Network, we have a group of about 30 student journalists, and they help us combat the spread of misinformation through social media storytelling. So as you can imagine, a 16-year-old's Instagram discovery page looks a lot different from mine. The types of claims they're seeing related to coronavirus are very different. They're seeing more claims of if you hold your breath for 10 seconds, that's a surefire way to prove that you don't have coronavirus, which is not true. And then from there, our teams, we really strongly encourage that they pitch their own stories. From there, they would write and produce a video fact check. Our main hub is Instagram. But we're not just telling you this is true, this is false. We are both media literacy and fact checking. So we teach you along the way how to fact check on your own. These teenagers are teaching crucial media literacy skills like reverse image search, reverse video search. So they're teaching skills that professional journalists and fact checkers use.
Those are great skills to have, and I know that people can find them at MediaWise. Alexa Volland with MediaWise, Samantha Ivey from Skyline High School, a senior and first-time voter. Ladies, thank you both so much for joining us.
Thank you, too.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And you can visit pointer.org/Teen Fact Checking Network to see daily fact checks for teenagers done by MediaWise's team of Gen Z fact checkers. You can find more of our coverage at kqed.org/kqed-newsroom. I'm Priya David Clemens. You can reach me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Priya D. Clemens. Tonight, we're heading just south of San Jose for our weekly look at something beautiful. The Coyote Creek Parkway was full of sunshine and smiles this week as people and animals enjoyed the trails and waterways. From all of us here at KQED Newsroom, thanks for joining us. Good night.